Yeah,
Good.
of course. Yeah.
So again, if students have undergraduate offers, are they able to uh, do they need to apply for accommodation now, or do they need to have chosen Nottingham again as a firm or insurance choice before they apply for accommodation?
Yeah, so they need to have us as a firm or insurance choice before applying. That's what we'd always recommend. And then once they're in that status, then they can make an accommodation application.
And how many halls of residence do they need to choose when they're applying?
So I think they have up to normally 4 or 5 choices. So we'd recommend kind of them picking at least 3 or 4 choices, and then they can definitely get one of those choices. We do have accommodation guarantee as long as they apply before our final deadline, which I think is in May this year.
Okay, because Nottingham has opened accommodation quite early, earlier
Yes.
than a lot of other universities. So one of the concerns that students have is if they wait for all their offers to come in and then they make their firm and insurance choice, are they at a disadvantage with Nottingham accommodation because your accommodation is already opened, whereas some other universities haven't opened their accommodation? Or will you wait, or is there sort of like an equal consideration deadline after which you will start allocating rooms or making offers for accommodation?
Yeah, we normally have a bit more of a lag in terms of allocating accommodation, so they shouldn't be too far disadvantaged. We have had obviously applications in already, so I think they're looking at assigning the first wave of accommodation fairly soon, and then they'll go back and give it another kind of month or so before reassigning the next batch of accommodation. So I don't think it puts students at a disadvantage. I think the one thing to bear in mind is that it's always fairly transparent on the website what's still open and what's available. So if you are thinking of applying for accommodation at Nottingham, then you might just want to double check what's available before making an application or taking it forward. But I don't see that it will be too limited by the time you come to apply.
All right. Okay. So they're not really at a disadvantage if they do wait for all
No.
their 5 offers to come in.
Yeah, absolutely. They should still be fine as long as they will have, as long as they've got a response before May, then they'll be fine.
Okay, great. That's good to know because there's a lot of panic about Nottingham
Oh,
having
bless them.
their accommodation. So I'm glad you've clarified that. Good. Yes, and again, another one about accommodation. Is there a limit to say how many catered halls they can choose, or how many ensuite options they can choose, or can they just choose whatever they like?
They should be able to choose whatever they like, so there's no limit to which ones they choose. Catered accommodation does tend to be a bit more popular, so if you are keen on catered accommodation, it's probably worth picking as many catered accommodation as possible to guarantee that you get that catered accommodation. But that's the only thing I would say. But other than that, they're fine to choose as many different types of accommodation or same types of accommodation as they like.
Okay, so that's so there's no limit because again there are some universities that will only allow you to choose say 2 ensuite and the rest perhaps not. So it's good to know that Nottingham's got that flexibility that students can actually choose what they want to choose. How likely are they to get sort of the choices that they have put down, or are they likely, or rather, how likely are they to be bumped off to an option that they did not choose originally on their form?
I think most students will end up, as long as they've applied by the deadline, they'll end up with something that's on their form. I haven't really heard of any cases where we've had to give students accommodation that's not been in their kind of selected 4 or 5 choices. So they should be allocated one that they've kind of already pre-checked. It's very unlikely that they'd have to move. The only cases that we've had where students are given completely different accommodation, there have been very rare cases when something's happened with that accommodation, so we can no longer have people in that housing. We've had to move them for either health and safety reasons or refurb reasons, but that will be the only reason.
Okay, and also another one about accommodation. With the catered accommodation, how many meals does that typically involve? Is that sort of all 3 meals? Is that only dinner? So what kind of options do they have in catered?
Yeah, it's all 3 meals. And then normally lunch is on a lunch card. So you'll get an amount for the week. And that's used to spend on lunch throughout that week as well. So it's not sort of in the same kind of pool setting that you would have your breakfast and dinner. You have your lunch kind of out and about. And that's obviously a lot more flexible and easier for students if they're in between lectures to just go and grab something and use their card to do that. They don't have a daily limit, so they just have a weekly limit and they can spend that any which way you want. So a student might want to blow that all on the Monday and then pay for their own lunch or other things. Or we've had cases when students have maybe gone away for a week and then they've obviously had their money saved up for that week and are able to like treat their friends to a big meal at the end of the week. So they can use it however they want and spend it however they want, which is really nice to have that flexibility. Just adding to catered accommodation, we do publish menus online. So if you just Google University of Nottingham catered accommodation menu, it should take you to those menus and you can get a feel for what you would be offered for breakfast and dinner. And as I said, yeah, the card you just spend across campus in the different canteens and restaurants and shops.
And that card is for lunch. And breakfast and dinner are in the halls, in the dining hall, in whichever hall they're living at.
Yeah, that's correct. But the one thing about the card is there's no limit how you spend it, when you spend it. So some students one day might want to sort of shake things up and do it like slightly differently. So it allows that flexibility for them.
That's really good. And they can also carry that over from one week to the next, or do they have to use that amount within a week?
My knowledge is that they have to use it within the week and then it's refreshed every week.
All right. Well, that's great. So at least they're not having to run back.
Yes, exactly, to get to lunchtime.
Because I think with catered accommodation, that's something that students eventually find slightly restrictive sometimes. I mean, yes. Of course, catered does give them that freedom of not having to worry about cooking. But one of the concerns is that they might not be using it enough because they're not always, sort of in the vicinity of their halls. So of course, the card gives them that flexibility.
Yes.
I'm just going to check if there are any further questions. I'm just going to go on to the other Facebook page where we're sharing this just to see.